In this lecture, we will look at the difficulties the early church faced and their response to the challenge. The blood of martyrs is the seed of the church, wrote Tertullian, the 2nd century North African bishop. This was literally true during the first 3 centuries of Christian history, whereby it paid heavy price in preserving and proclaiming the truth it affirms. The persecution of Christianity started with the crucifixion of Jesus himself through a combined effort of Jewish leadership and Roman authority. It was from these two authorities that the main fury of persecution against Christians was to come during the early years of Christian history. The main reason for the persecution against Christianity was because it was considered as an illegal religion. The Jewish persecution of Christianity arose out of their conviction that Christianity was a Jewish sect of misguided individuals who followed Jesus of Nazareth, whom the Jewish authority had condemned as a blasphemer. The New Testament records a number of instances of Jewish persecution of Christians. Stephen, for instance, was stoned to death, becoming the first Christian martyr. They executed James, the brother of John. According to the book of Acts, the apostles and the believers were constantly harassed by the Jews. Judaism was one of the few regional religions in the Roman Empire which enjoyed religious concessions, including exemption from participating in the imperial cult. The Jews, instead, were to pray for the emperor following their own religious tradition. Thus, for early Christianity, being a part of Judaism gave them religious immunity. However, by the middle of the 1st century, it became clear that the Christian movement had parted ways with Judaism. Thus, it was now an illegal religion. It was then that the Roman persecution of Christianity began. The first persecution of Christians by the Romans occurred in about AD 52 under Roman Emperor Claudius, who expelled Christians from Rome. This seems to have been caused by the conflicts between Jews and Christians, which the Christians were accused to have instigated. Aquila and Priscilla, whom Apostle Paul met at Corinth, were part of this persecution. This, however, seems to have been more of an act of maintaining law and order rather than a religious persecution. The first religious persecution of Christians occurred around AD 64, when Emperor Nero started persecuting Christians, accusing them as despisers of the Roman gods and for claiming as loyal subjects of a higher king than Caesar. They were also implicated for crime against the state when Nero blamed the Christians for a fire that destroyed part of the city of Rome. It was in this persecution that the apostles Peter and Paul were martyred. From this time onwards, for about 2 centuries, Christians were to suffer persecution from the Roman authority until it received legal status in AD 313. Many of the apostles were martyred in Roman lands. For instance, Andrew, Philip, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Matthias all died in Roman territory. Some of the apostles preached the gospel outside the Roman Empire and met their martyrdom there. Thomas was martyred in India. Matthew was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. Bartholomew met his martyrdom in Armenia. Simon the Zealot was killed in Persia. Jude was either martyred in Persia or in Armenia. Christians continued to experience martyrdom in the post-apostolic period. Ignatius of Antioch was fed to wild beasts. Polycarp of Smyrna was burnt at stake. Cyprian of Carthage was beheaded. The Christian martyrs noted above are just few of the prominent names of Christians who were martyred for the faith during the first 3 centuries. Early Christians from the beginning faced grave dangers, and many suffered death for their convictions. Those who suffered and died for the faith came to be known as martyrs, meaning witness. It was their testimony that affirms the truth of the gospel and the conviction of its bearers. Their faith and commitment was the foundation on which early Christianity was founded. In the light of the persecution against Christians, some educated Christians devoted themselves to write in defense of Christian faith. These writers are known as the apologists. The main thrust of their work was the refutation of misunderstandings leveled against Christianity. Celsus, for instance, wrote a book entitled On the True Doctrine, in which he wrote particularly against the Christian refusal to participate in the imperial cult. In response, Christian apologists engaged themselves in refuting such gross misinterpretation of Christianity. Origen of Alexandria, for instance, wrote a book entitled Against Celsus, in which he engaged with the various accusations leveled against Christianity by Celsus. Some apologists went further and addressed their writings to the Roman emperors themselves, with the intended purpose of proving the innocence of Christianity and to convince them that Christians did not deserve to be persecuted. One such apologist was Justin Martyr. His most famous work was his apology addressed to the Roman emperors Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius. In this work he argued that Christians are good citizens because they are quiet, peace-loving, and constantly pray for the welfare of the empire. Another apologist was Aristides of Athens. He addressed his apology to the Roman emperors Antoninus Pius in about AD 140. He argued that Christians suffer persecution unjustly and appealed to the emperor to look into the matter with an eye of justice. The apologists stood up for the Christian faith and put their intellectual ability to good use in defense of Christianity. They were willing to expose themselves of their Christian affiliation at a time when doing so would put them in direct contact with the persecutors themselves. In the process, some of them even lost their life so that others could live.